During this time, it's very important to support local, family-owned small businesses. If it's within your means, please consider making a purchase from Revival Drum Shop. Revival's owner, Jose Medelis, has been a guest and big supporter of this show, and it's my unpaid opinion that Revival is among the greatest drum shops in the world. You can show your support by purchasing a Revival gift card online and by buying Jose's fantastic creative treatise, The Stoic Drummer, which is a spiritually enriching tome for any creative person, not just drummers. Do yourself a favor and visit revivaldrumshop.com. This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During this era of social distancing, we're recording remotely and releasing daily episodes. Today's guest is known for his roles in such films as The Big Lebowski, Suburbia, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. He's also an accomplished bassist who's worked with artists such as Young MC, Atoms for Peace, Rocket Juice and the Moon, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's also co-founder of Silver Lake Conservatory of Music, a nonprofit music education foundation. And his excellent memoir, Acid for the Children, was published last year. Flea spoke to me from his home in Los Angeles.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, Flea, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. How were your eggs this morning?
Oh, dude, they were so good. I red onion and some heirloom tomato and a perfectly ripened avocado in an egg scramble. It was good.
Do you have an avocado tree?
I do. I have two avocado trees, but neither of them are really producing good avocados. These are from the store.
Yeah, we have one behind our house, but it's tricky. There's not any good fruit on it quite yet.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing with mine, too. They're kind of watery, and they're just not that good. And I used to have a tree in a different house I lived in. It was a Haas tree, and it was just all the perfect avocados you could handle. My dog got so fat because they kept falling on the ground, and my dog, like, ballooned up to just, like, looked like an avocado.
Do you cook a lot?
I do. Well, now in the time of Corona, I'm really cooking a lot because my wife doesn't cook a lot. And so I do most of the cooking. Last night I made a spaghetti squash, and it was good.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed your book.
Oh, thanks, dude.
I had a question to kind of kick it off, and that's you've already kind of achieved a pretty extraordinary level of success as a musician and even as an actor, and I wonder if it felt particularly vulnerable to wade into the waters of writing.
Yeah, it was terrifying. Like, when I started, like, the writing, like, the wading into it wasn't really scary for me. I mean, there were moments, especially in the beginning out, where I didn't know what I was going to write yet, but I knew that I was going to do it by myself and that I had to, really embrace my own voice and find my own voice. And that was a little bit scary, but I had faith that, like, look, I'm just going to take my time and write till it's done, But once I had written it, then it was terrifying. The idea of putting it out and sharing it, and it was just a really raw, vulnerable feeling. Like, I didn't know what way, like, I could be attacked or humiliated or made fun of, or you know what I mean? People can twist things in so many different ways. And it was, really unfounded. I just, I guess, like, being honest and vulnerable when writing is rewarded, because, I mean, I'm not sure if I've done really well commercially or not. I think I've done pretty well, but it like, I just, everywhere I went on the book tour, I was really met with a lot of love, and it meant a lot to me.
You mentioned that people can twist things out of context, but really, is it more of an issue of kind of in your mind creating these hypothetical scenarios where people are going to hate it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I guess think I became scared and paranoid about that. Yeah, like I just I imagined all these weird scenarios of just being insulted and demeaned, and people looking for for reasons to like and just thinking I was a pretentious twat, like for trying to be poetic, or any number of reasons where they could hate it. Yeah, and I did project like all these like scary scenarios. Yeah,
Well, in the end, are you happy with how it came out?
yeah, I'm really happy about it. I there's still things like the my only question once in a while to myself is that when I wrote the book, I obviously I wrote a lot more than I put out, and I there were a lot of stories that I thought were, really kind of like wild, funny stories, or interesting, or sad, or good stories, and that I thought that I wrote as wrote them pretty well, and I took them out because I decided, like, after I wrote a shitload, when I in the editing process, I decided that to for one, just to trim it down and make it like read as make it like as efficient as possible, but also I wasn't going to put any story in just for the sake of it being a good story. Everything had to like really be something specific that affected me, and the way that I evolved as a as a human being, and as an artist, and as a just a person interacting in the world. And so I kind of wondered, like, it would have been more like exciting of a book had I left some of those stories in.
Well, what's a story that was the hardest to pull out, but in the end, you pulled it out for the sake of the narrative?
There were a few, but like there was one, like, I had a gay experience when I was a kid, and like probably lots of kids do, and I was like, I don't know, like 14 or something, and I had this kid, and we experimented with homosexuality, and I I realized that like it didn't really, it was just like me, this kid, like just fooling around trying things, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And and I took it out because and I thought, it was a good story, and I took it out because, look, I'm not gay, and it it just seemed like I was doing it. It was kind of like, it was like shocking. You know what I mean?
It's also the kind of thing that would be the headline when people
Totally.
are
And
writing
that,
about your book.
yeah, totally. You know what I mean? Like, Flea sucked a dick. You know what I mean? Like, and
That's a
like,
good headline. Please suck
yeah,
a dick.
sure, great, but you know what I mean? Like, who cares? You
Right.
know? And I kind of, and like, like any, like things like that, where I just kind of did it just because I go, well, this will freak him out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just kind of felt like it was not necessarily like of a service to anybody. Like, I thought, well, the value of it is I'm kind of like, tipping my hat to homophobes and to my gay brothers and sisters. You know what I mean? But it's like, truthfully, it wasn't really a big deal to me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It was like, you know, so so yeah, that's one.
What did you learn about yourself by going through the process of writing a book?
A lot. Um, I learned that I love to write was a big one. Um, because being someone who, I've always loved to read so much and had never really written beyond like little essays, or, things for people, like little, intros to people's records or whatever. I'd never really tried to write. And I learned that I just love the process of writing. Um,
Did it feel different from the process of writing music?
Totally different. Totally different. The process of writing music for me is such a physical thing. It's very like the way that I am on stage, like jumping around and stuff. It's not like I'm sitting at the piano or sitting on my couch at home playing bass and jumping around, but it's very physical for me. Like the way that I move my body from behind the beat or ahead of the beat, or the physical act of playing. You know what I mean? It's like I get my arms and everything moving in a rhythm. It's like a dance. And writing is so cerebral. Just sitting quietly and writing, and I had never done that before. I didn't really do it that much in school. Because I was just kind of a ne'er do well in school. Like I just kind of was a fuck up and didn't really pay attention. And I found a part of myself while I was writing that just felt so good. Like I would really get lost in it when I was at my best. When I was writing stuff um, that I thought was, like I was really kind of getting to the truth of the matter and getting underneath the thing that happened, like to the like the real energy of moving something. I would just kind of get lost in this space, and I put my head down for an hour and write. And when I lifted my head up, I was like, God, that was a great hour. Like it was beyond thought, like just kind of like music in that way, or like, any like thing that you do, like, if you like sports, like for me, basketball, I love like playing sports or love making or anything that like gets you lost in the moment where you're, beyond thought like that really gratified me in that way, beyond thought way, but in a engaging a different part of myself than I ever had before. So that was a big thing that I found out about myself, and one that I really, I'm so into writing music right now that I'm not writing words, but but I will, and I really love doing it, and just like the process of like taking this thing and then like you write a shitload and then like honing it and shaping it like a sculpt. It's like like you hear about a sculpture, like taking a big block of clay and just getting rid of everything that isn't the sculpture. And I really love that. And I learned about myself, like because I wrote about my childhood, and my childhood is so long gone. And one of the main reasons I wrote about it was, one, I didn't like extend past my childhood. Like once I like the band started, I ended it. For one, I didn't want to like count on the band and like writing about the band, because I knew that was like an easy win. you know I could just write about like every time we're in the studio, what happened, what went down, and like, yeah, there'd be a lot of good stories, and it would be a personal account from my you know my my feelings of joy and pain, and my emotional feelings. But to just write about my childhood, which is something that I can, since it's over, it's something that I can have a much more profound degree of objectivity about. It was, to go back and look at my childhood with objectivity, which, we all have these things we remember about our childhood all the time, I think, like consciously and unconsciously. Like there's things that you remember, stories you'll tell, but there's so many things that, at least for me, and I think for all of us, that just guide us, like in decisions that we make and ways that we act, and our sense of what's right or integrity, or, what's bullshit, our bullshit detectors, so much of it is guided by these things that happened when we were childhood, when we were kids. And to go back and look at it and really get into it, um, I learned a lot about myself, about things that have been motivating me all my life that I didn't really realize, and things that I had reason to be so grateful for, and things that were super sad and difficult, and it's funny because when I would write about the stuff, like when I wrote about things in my childhood that were, that happened. When I was writing, it was almost like I was kind of telling a story. I was just trying to tell it well and see what happened and try to understand why it happened and all this stuff, and just do a good job of it. But when it was done, and it started when I had an editor, and I'd, write 20 pages, 10 pages, whatever, and send it to him. And he would come back with his comments, mostly, grammatical, or you're repeating yourself too much here, or this seems interesting. How come you didn't, you touched on it, you didn't write more? Um, and and he would write me, and I would, either agree with him or disagree with him about certain things. But oftentimes I'd go over it with him on the phone, and I'd read what I wrote, And man, I couldn't get through 2 pages without crying, you know? And then when I did the audio book, it was just like just a sob fest, you know? You know what I mean? Like literally,
Yeah.
it was like I had to stop because I was crying constantly, and I realized like so much of this stuff was so sad for me, and to write it was one thing, but to articulate it, I learned like how much I was carrying around, and when I put it in a form that I could articulate, and I'm saying it in a way that I couldn't say it before because I hadn't really researched my own self or been as acutely conscious of these things that happened. Man, it was a real really ripped me open, and all the I guess the obvious, like the evolution that you go through as a person when you do that.
If you could go back in a time machine and have a conversation with yourself when you were living in New York, what would you tell that person and what would you ask him?
No, that's a good question. As a kid, I would guess I would just want to tell myself as a kid, like, hey, it's not your fault. All the shit that's going down, it's not your fault.
Because in the book, what you're talking about at that stage in your life is your parents kind of transitioning from being buttoned up, products of the post-war era to then transitioning into this more bohemian lifestyle. Your
Yeah,
parents got divorced and you went to live with your mom and your stepfather, who was a jazz musician.
yeah, yeah. And I guess it's like something that you only learn as an adult is that even though your parents might be like making huge mistakes, they're doing it with the best with what they know.
Yeah, I
You know
think
what I
that's a very important thing to realize is
mean? Yeah,
they're not consciously fucking up.
yeah. They just don't know any better,
And I think that's
or they
all.
don't have the skills to. And I guess but as a kid, you just want to feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So how did well, let's talk about then you moved to California eventually and
yeah,
you were essentially, your life was pretty unstructured and you were basically living like a street kid on the streets of Hollywood.
yeah.
What was the most positive thing to come out of that kind of unstructured lifestyle?
Finding my own way. It was a slow and undisciplined and um, way of like many mistakes and slippery slopes and hurting myself, being hurtful to other people. But I figured it out on my own. I had to go my own way, and because I didn't have, I wasn't really close to my family, in a way that I trusted them, or in a way that I looked to them for guidance, or felt like a stability at home. So I was out in the street and I was doing stupid crimes and doing drugs and, just like running around all wild, but, also guided by like my love for these things that I loved so much, like music and basketball and literature and the things that I loved. I, I, I looked to my friends and the people that I bonded with over things that I loved and over this desire for liberation and freedom and to get into stuff that was meaningful. When I found friends that I could partner up with doing that, those relationships were so meaningful to me with my friends. And even though that's scary too, because when you put all your faith in a 15-year-old boy who's fucking crazy or crazier than you out in the street, you can really get hurt. But um, the reason I ended up being able to have a career as a musician and to create a band that was able to touch people and able to have its own voice, its own unique voice, like it or not. It is its own unique voice. And the reason that that was able to happen was because of the bonds that, we formed when we were kids in the street. And so I think had I, I don't know what, I think things would have been a lot more pleasant and easier had I had, like, the stable home life and all of that. But 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 doing it the way that I did it made me go my own way and, try to trial by fire and blunder and act like a complete fool, but find a way that was my own way and a unique way and a different kind of education and a different kind of intelligence being activated. Um, and I'm so grateful for that.
So then, as a parent, and as somebody who presumably is able to take what you learned from your parents and take it one step further, and somebody that has resources beyond what were available to you when you were a child, how do you strike a balance between giving your own family the kind of stability that you were searching for as a kid, but then also making sure that they can find their own way and fuck up and act like a fool and have license to make mistakes?
Yeah, well, I think that's just kind of the human condition, I think, some kids are going to be smarter and figure things out and have a sort of innate sense of ethics growing up that they learn from the way that their parents are and the way that, the world is around them. But for me, I would never want my, look, I started doing drugs when I was 11 years old. I started smoking weed. And by the time I was 17, I was shooting up, like
But
I
then
was
you were
never,
sober at a pretty young age too.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, relatively young. When I turned 30 is when I stopped doing drugs. Um, but, but like my thing, like, I have two kids. I have a 31-year-old daughter and I have a 14-year-old daughter. And as a parent, obviously, I'd never want my kids to do drugs, and I try to like let them know because I fucking know how bad it can be and what happens. And I have a lot of friends who ended up really destroying their dreams and their hopes and their lives by drugs. But I from the get go with my kids, I've always told them, um, you can do whatever you want. It's only rules that I have are you can't hurt yourself and you can't hurt anyone else. And if you do that, I'm going to step in and do everything I can to guide you away from that. But outside of that, go for it. You know what I mean? And I guess I would never try to control them into being a certain way, a certain kind of person, or have my beliefs, whether it's they're my ethical or political or any kind of belief.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. I mean, for yeah, that's what I think.
One of the things that I really related to in your book is this connection between, or your evolution from being somebody who listened almost exclusively to jazz to
Yeah,
discovering punk, and then kind of at first reluctantly embracing punk because of the lack of virtuosity by design in that
yeah,
music form. But
yeah,
then, ultimately discovering the spiritual connection between those two art forms.
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, well, it's kind of went in like there were two big stages for me with that, and as a kid, when my mom married a jazz musician when I was 11 years old, and I was brought up in a jazz household. I wanted to be a jazz trumpet player. I played trumpet. I, had my trumpet heroes like Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis, and Clifford Brown, the great, the great jazz trumpet players.
Man, I
And
love that stuff that he did with Max Roach. It's like
oh man, me
that's the
too.
high, that's the gold standard.
It it really is, man. that quartet, man, or quartet,
When they had Sonny in the
quintet.
band too, it was just
Yeah,
amazing. I mean, it
yeah,
doesn't get any better than that.
yeah. Well, for that, I mean, there's so much great jazz, but that, like, it's just so pure, and it's so, like, clear and joyful, and the rhythm is so fucking intense, man. Like when they play
When they play Cherokee,
Cherokee, I was just thinking that, dude, dude. Still for me, it's like funny because I think there's like different types of music, like um, for people that obviously you really love music, so there's music that like you're always like I'm sure you're like me, you're always listening to different new music and stuff and
yes.
wanting to discover new stuff and learning. And there's things that like some things you'll be like, oh, that's great, and you really appreciate it, but it's not something you like go to for comfort for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
And then there's music that comes that you'll want to hear it forever. Like it'll always be a go-to record. Like there's a difference between like the comfort music and the music you learn from. Does
Yes.
that make sense? Or music you appreciate, and like there's those records that you go. And for me, that Clifford Brown, Max Roach quintet, like that stuff is a record that I like. It's like at least every 6 months at the most. I put it on, and every time it blows my mind and like gives me perspective of that things are going to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. It's music that you can learn from, and it makes you just feel warm in your heart.
Yeah, totally. And it's and you feel, I think like any music that is so like pushing the envelope when it's made, that it also has like a real like such a human component that really touches you, and the craft, and like works on so many different levels, cerebrally, emotionally. It's like it's yeah, it's infinite. You know what I mean? It like there's always something new you can learn from it. You know, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's like it's timeless, and it's always sounds fresh and exciting and new because it was fresh and exciting and new when it happened.
So anyway, we were kind of
So,
talking about how
oh
you
yeah, yeah,
evolved
yeah,
from.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, sorry, yeah, yeah. We're tangenting. Um, but so then so I only like jazz, and I looked down on other forms of music, like rock music, which obviously here I am a kid in the '70s, and there's incredible rock music going on in the '70s, well, like '60s into the '70s, and I just growing up in a jazz household, I was like. I adopted my stepdad's attitude, who was my musical hero, that, this is dumb music. This is for music people who don't really learn how to play music. They're interested in haircuts and fashion. It's got nothing to do with music. It's like a commercial. It's for selling things.
And that's a
And
common attitude among lots of people from that generation that I've talked to.
totally, totally, yeah. And I adopted that completely, which obviously, which made me a complete nerd, in school, because I just had no idea about rock music. I didn't know what the fuck it was, and when I heard it, it just sounded like noise to me. It just sounded like what are they doing? Like why do you like this? It's just like it's for 2-year-olds. Um, but then cut to high school, and I meet Hillel Slovak, who plays guitar in a rock band, and I fall in love with him. He's this beautiful boy. He's he's smart and poetic and funny, and me and Anthony were already best friends. Um, and and then I meet Hillel, and Anthony was like, he liked rock music, but he didn't turn me on it. You know what I mean? Um, and then I met Hillel, and he just believed in it so much, like his connection to the music that he loved, to Jimi Hendrix, like Zeppelin and Rush, and Jeff Beck, and these bands that he loved, like it it meant everything in the world to him. And it was just kind of by virtue, like at first, not the music itself, but the fact that it meant so much to him, and this was someone that I loved, that I opened my heart to it. And I'd go over to his house and we'd sit and we'd listen. And, Hendrix was the thing that really got me, you know? Um, and I fell in love with it, and I had liked funk music already too, because it had trumpets in it. And like as a kid, I think, playing trumpet, I was like, well, this is a way that I could work. Um, and, I just fell in love with Jimi Hendrix because it had that funk element. And he was obviously, probably like one of the greatest, if not the greatest, virtuoso electric guitar player of all time. And
So
I
there
fell
was
in love.
that element of virtuosity that could kind of hook you in as a jazz
Yeah,
kid.
totally, totally. Yeah, and then like Rush, like like the Hemispheres. He had that record and had all these like odd time signatures, and then like and he and Hillel played with this other guitar player named Alan, and Alan was super into prog rock, and he turned me on to Weather Report and Brand X and Mahavishnu Orchestra and Return to Forever and all this prog rock, and these guys, could fucking play. They were all virtuosos, and fusion and jazz rock, and so I got into rock music like from that angle. You know what I mean? But it was so much different than jazz, and there, all the like the obviously Hendrix and Zeppelin, and they rocked out, and I started like falling in love and romancing not just the virtuosity was a big part of it, but also the rocking out thing. You know what I mean? And then Hillel asked me to start playing bass and be in his band, and then I was just hooked. And I was corny, and I did dumb rock star poses, and you know what I mean, and imagined like being in a limousine and being in Led Zeppelin, and like all of this stuff, and
It's
and
funny because that stuff actually happened to you later on.
I know. Totally. Yeah, yeah, totally. Even though I had, you know what I mean? I didn't, there's like, I'm kind of joking about that. Like, there was that, but it was really like maybe as a flight of fancy that I considered. I really just wanted, you know? Really, to be honest, it was more about like a feeling of belonging, you know? Because I was, always kind of a nerd, and I felt like I didn't have, I kind of like went from like friend to friend, and I never, I always felt, kind of like a loner, um, and when I joined I was never cool. I was scared of girls, like that kind of thing, and when I joined the rock band with Hillel, a band called Anthem with Hillel and Jack Irons, who I ended up starting the Chili Peppers with, and Alan, um, it was like a feeling of like all of a sudden, like I was like part of this thing, like being in a gang or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and it also seemed like you were kind of coming into yourself at that point. Like,
yeah, yeah. Even though I hadn't really found myself as a bass player yet, I mean, I was really like playing, music that they wrote, you know, but I thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and I was, like, I definitely approached the bass a lot differently because I played trumpet, and it was more like kind of like horn lines for me, but
mhm.
also like they told me what to play a lot in the beginning, like it goes like this, and but so we started jamming, and I started finding myself through improvisation, and finding myself, but I was still. I still had like by the time like the Chili Peppers started, I felt like I really had a very unique voice as a bass player. Like I had really found my able to marry all these different elements together as a bass player. But
Yeah,
but the
when did you find that voice?
um it I built it.
Hmm.
It was like because I started off and yes, I had my own style. Um, and and the fact that we were into like improvisation and fusion and prog rock and all this stuff, we and then we like discovered like new age kind of, I mean, like new wave arty music, like Robert Fripp and um
Eno.
yeah, well, we didn't know Eno. We didn't know
Oh,
Eno.
okay.
Yeah, no, we weren't cool enough. I wish I would have known Eno. 'Cause I love Eno. I mean, I love all this stuff. Every music I say, I love it all. But I
Is
guess
there anything you don't love?
yeah, there's lots of music that I don't love, but I still like. I appreciate every kind of music. Like music that I even
Yes.
like don't like, I appreciate it. And for one thing, it's making someone happy somewhere, and for another thing, it's like the worst fucking formulaic pop crap. It's formulaic pop crap. It's hard to make.
Yeah, it's
You
hard.
got to learn a formula. You got to fucking, and you have to be, connect with kids that like it. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's an art form.
Hmm.
Like, what the fuck, man? People are like,
It's like
dropping.
making McDonald's food. It's like maybe McDonald's isn't good for you, but to make something that addictive and tasty is not easy.
And, it helps starving people to eat,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I think when I, just this kind of reflects back, I guess, when I really found my voice. Like I really felt like I set myself on a path, and obviously, ever since I'm always trying to learn and expand and get better. But we got into the rock music. I didn't like punk rock, but then, as I started playing clubs and stuff and getting around and learning, I joined this punk rock band Fear, we're a local LA hardcore band.
And yeah,
Um,
we've had Tim Spitsticks on this show years
oh,
ago.
cool!
Yeah.
Yeah, God, I love that guy. I miss him.
He's up in Portland these days teaching.
Oh, that's cool.
And the interesting thing about him is he also comes from a jazz background. I think when he was a little kid, he played with Art Pepper and other people like that on the West Coast.
You played with Art Pepper? You
I
never
think
told
his
me that, or I
family,
don't remember.
I think his family knew Art Pepper or something like that.
Wow. Did you ever read Straight Life?
Oh yeah, that's one of the best ones.
It really is. It really is. Once, right after I had read that book, um, I don't know if you remember this part, but it's like at one point his wife leaves him and takes up with this guy, Remo, who's the guy who makes Remo drum heads.
Hmm.
And, the guy's successful in business and stuff. And Art, there's like this really like heart wrenching scene in the book where he goes like banging on the door and she's living with Remo and he's like, "Baby, come back to me." I can't remember specifically, but he goes to try to entice her to, "What are you doing? Like, don't leave me." And he's really devastated. And she's at Remo's house, and Remo's like really like cold to him, like, "Get the fuck off my door," slams the door in his face, and he's just crushed. And like literally after I read that, like 5 days later, I was on a plane with the Chili Peppers, and it was like the first time we went on any like plane that wasn't a commercial plane, and it was they used to have this airline called MGM Grand that was like people would rent out the whole plane, and Chili Peppers got invited to go play in this charity pool tournament in New York, and we're on a plane with like 50 other bands and musicians. It's like a jet, but they rented the jet to the charity organization. And we go to play, and I was sitting next to fucking Remo,
No way.
right across the aisle. Yeah.
Did you bring it
I,
up?
no, I wouldn't talk to him. I was like,
Oh.
"Fucking asshole, you were mean to Art Pepper. Fuck you." Like I totally like it was like he had taken my wife.
Yeah, but Art Pepper probably deserved it at that
I'm
point.
sure he did. I'm sure that he was a junkie. I'm sure his wife was just like, I can't. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, junkies are impossible. But still, at the time, I had, you read someone's you read an autobiography like that, and it is it an autobiography? He wrote it, right?
Well, I thought he wrote it with his wife, right?
Oh,
Or
is that
she
right?
kind of
Okay,
like transcribed it or something.
okay, it must have been a later wife, right? So, but I can't
Yeah.
remember. I can't remember, but I mean, I read this is so. This is like fucking 25 longer, 30 years ago. But but I felt a lot of empathy for him after reading the book. I was so attached to his story, and Remo was just like this guy who he caused him much pain, and
No,
anyway.
I totally understand what you're saying because have you read Miles's book?
Yes.
So anytime I read a book by someone who has such a strong personality, I can't help it, but I start like thinking in their cadence when I'm reading the
Yeah.
book. Even in your
Yeah.
book, like I was thinking in your cadence for the couple days that I was reading it. But like
Right.
reading in Miles's book, I was almost my thoughts were almost in his voice, and that is a testament to the power of these types of books.
Yeah.
But do you have favorites among that genre? Like, were you reading other people's books when you were preparing to write your book?
I was reading, but I didn't read memoirs or autobiographies. Um, because it wasn't so much like I was looking for a formula of a way to do that, but just the art of writing, you know? So I was reading,
Did
like,
you
I
read
remember,
Stephen King's book?
it's funny. I just read that now. Like,
It's
that's the
great.
book. I finished that last week. And I didn't read any books on writing. I saw like some quotes and stuff, like Toni Morrison talking about how she wrote, and couple of other writers I can't remember, and I really took that to heart that there were two different types of writing. There was like totally free writing where you're just writing, just fucking put pen to paper and write words, and then there's like analytical writing where you look at the free writing and you organize it and come from a more I guess just an organizing standpoint, and that that was like okay, and so I divided my writing up into two different ways. Um,
When you were
but
writing, were you disciplined in like your approach? Would you set aside a specific time of day to do it?
Yeah, well, I wrote most of it. I had busted up my arm real bad a few years ago, and I I I was like couch bound for months because it was real. I broke it and like shattered the nerves. I broke it in like 7 places. And during that time, as soon as I got off the painkillers, I would get up every morning and just write. And that was yeah. So in the morning, I would write free, like get up without thinking, just write, go walk literally out of bed straight to a table, just sit and write. And I really like started finding myself as a writer in that time. I felt like I was really finding a voice um, and letting things happen. But but I didn't read memoirs. I like one book that really affected me, and it's kind of an autobiographical book, was of Human Bondage by Somerset Maugham.
I didn't read that
Uh,
one.
oh man, it's such a beautifully written book. My editor actually gave me a gift of that book and was like, I think you'll really relate to this book. And it's about a fictional character um, who has like a club foot, and he's always kind of like a handicapped person who uh, lives on the outside, and these like really tragic love stories and him trying to make his way in the world. And but it's just written the way that Somerset Maugham writes is so warm and clean and easy to read, and the most like profound things said in the simplest ways. Um and uh and Somerset Maugham, actually, my writer told me that he was gay in a time that it was very difficult to be gay, in a time and place where it was just like, no one can know, and that like the character in the book who has the club foot is kind of like that was his way of saying of being gay. You know what I mean? And having these love affairs that can never work out because it's, you know what I mean? Like all these difficult scenarios that he used. So it's like autobiographical. Um, but more like just the art of writing, not so much memoirs. Um,
One of the people that you thank at the end of your book is the guy that I think set this up is Ian MacKay,
oh
and
yeah, yep.
And for anybody that doesn't know, Ian runs a record label called Discord. He was in Minor Threat and the Teen Idols and Fugazi, and he's got a new band with Amy Farina and Joe Lawley. But anyway, how did Ian help you in this process?
Ian helped me by, I mean, Ian's a person who, just by virtue of who he is and my, very, like long time friendship with him now, like 36 years, something like that. Um, who's always, he's just like a touchstone of sanity for me, in everything that I do. But he was when I wrote my, what I thought was finished, but I wasn't sure, and it ended up really kind of just being a first draft, a first finished draft. He was, I think, the first person I gave it to read, maybe the second. And I probably gave it to too many people, but gave it to people to read, and I really valued his input. Really guided my story a lot, and I went back and kind of looked at it and thought about what I needed and what I didn't need. And it's funny because I didn't even think about this before. We're talking about like stories that serve the purpose. You know what I mean? Of what I really like. What is my theme? What is the thing that I really want to say? And when I started thinking about that, like one of the things he said to me is like, look, Flea, people need to, you're telling the story, and people need to know like who you are now. And I was like, yeah, but it's not about me now. And it's important for me to stay in the voice of who I was then, you know? And he was like, yeah, but, it's been 26 years since you've done drugs, and it's, this really conscious, thoughtful person. But like when I met you, and during a time of like when you're a kid, you're a fucking maniac, you know? In so many words, you know what I mean? Like I can't remember his specific words, but he was like, and he basically said like I think like when you're talking about like your drug abuse and stuff, and obviously Ian's, people know that he never did drugs and straight edge and all that, but he's not a judgmental person, and he was like, it's not a matter of like some moral obligation or like or this is right and this is wrong, but he's like, you have to be careful when you're telling these stories that you're not romanticizing drug use or bragging about it. You know what I mean? And because he goes, I know that that's not you, and it's like if he goes, I'm not, you should think about that. And it wasn't so much about that, even though that was a really good point, because in my telling of the story, I just wanted to tell it as dynamically as I could. I would just tell how I felt when I was a kid, and I was like, I want drugs. I don't want to be a part of your fucking world. You know what I mean? Like I want to create my own world. And though I I feel like I ended up like making it clear that that's what I was doing, I was just careful to not to put it in perspective, and to put it in a way where I wasn't, like in that way. But it wasn't just about the drugs. Like that was one thing, but I took it to heart in a way that it's important that what I'm writing about is, my childhood and how it shaped me, and how everything that you do in life is a lesson that you everything you're learning from everything that you do all the time. If you're a person that's evolving and changing, everything is a fucking lesson. This conversation with you right now is a lesson. Like, and 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 I took it in a way, not just it's one thing about the drug thing, but also in a way like when I'm writing, what does this serve? You know what I mean? Like not just like, okay, this is a great, like a wild story, but for one, how did this, help me to evolve, or how did it, stop me from evolving, or what did I learn, or what did I, what good or bad path did it send me down, and how does it, you know what I mean? Like what is the core help to the story here,
And I
and
think
that
that
was
really comes across in the book.
thank you. Yeah, and it was just important thing. So it made me look through and like change a lot of little things, just in a way that served the story. Like it didn't make me want to like pretend that I didn't like drugs when I was a kid, because I fucking loved them. I thought that shooting heroin was the greatest thing a person could do. you know?
Lots of people do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it seemed like I originally the title of the book was "It Seemed Like a Good Idea at the Time." That was my first. That was my first title. But
Well, I think maybe the title could be "It Was a Good Idea" at the time, because
yeah,
it was what it
totally.
was, and it
Yeah, it was
informed
what
who
it
you are
was,
now.
and yeah, and I had to go through that shit. Like I mean, had to or not had to, I don't know, but
You
I
did,
did.
yeah.
I did. And everything that I did was born of a yearning, of a deep fucking yearning to connect, to to be myself, and to have faith in myself, and to find the thing that I knew was inside of me, like burning and yearning, and like this light that of wanting to connect and shine it, but I didn't know how to do it, and I knew that I had to do it in my own way. I just didn't have the skills or the framework, and I was like wildly insecure and wildly arrogant, and all of these things,
Well, yeah, I
um,
mean, arrogance and insecurity go hand in hand, right?
yeah, they really do. They really
Well,
do.
so you said right now you're working on writing a lot of music and you're taking a break
Yeah.
from writing words.
Yeah.
And John is back in the band.
Yep.
So what are you up to creatively
Um,
right now?
yeah. Well, I don't want to really. I always like am hesitant to get into Chili Pepper stuff because um, I, it, it's just kind of as a band. I always feel like it's like when it's time for us to talk about what we're doing, it's time to talk about it. And but we're writing. We're writing, and we write together. We get together in a room, and we play. And we come in with ideas, we connect with one another, and we play. And um, I just think I'm hesitant to talk about it. I'm really grateful to be playing with John, and Anthony and Chad, and it's beautiful. Yeah,
Speaking of Chad, he was on this show a few years ago.
really.
And so
That
was,
motherfucker's on everywhere.
well, I've actually had several people that you've played with. I've had Chad, Joey, DH, Stella, Spitsticks.
Wow.
Because when we started the show, it was only about drummers for the first 200 episodes. And we're
Wow. Are you a
slow.
drummer?
Yeah, I'm a drummer.
Oh, okay, cool. You play in a band?
Well, right now I have my own album that's coming out this year that I'm singing on. I played drums on it too, but I'm not playing drums live anymore for now.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I wanted to ask you what you look for in a drummer. If you were to start a new band today
Yeah.
and you were making a flyer to hang up in record stores looking for a drummer, what would you put on it?
uh, Someone to connect with my heart. That would be my first thought if I was going to put it into a simple slogan like that. But like, I don't know that I can describe it that simply. The drummers that I've always loved to play with, obviously, the the deepest commitment to connection and groove is number one. There's nothing for me like the drummer that I don't like to play with is someone who's into showing their tricks, like uh how many you know what I mean? Like I've played with drummers who want to like do all fills and all this fancy shit. I just don't give a fuck.
Hmm.
And it's actually a deterrent to me, unless it's in the context arrangement and groove and feel and this man, because like when a groove is really locking, the simplest thing is so powerful, but
And that's
but like
something that Chad is a master of.
Chad's got great groove, and that's he's awesome like that, and for me, like the thing that Chad has that's really great is it's it's groove, but it's also like, okay, this groove is gonna sit back behind the beat. This one we're pushing ahead. This one is right in the fucking middle. You know what I mean? Like, and this one we're gonna slowly speed up into the next section, or stuff that's really a thing. You know what I mean? Like, there's like, I know, like in the funk world, there's like, I don't even know if this is an expression anymore, but like when we were working with George and different, funk guys back then, like in Detroit and stuff, it was like they always talk about fat back. You know that expression?
Yeah,
You know?
we had Jabbo and Clyde on this show, and they talked about that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. And you know, that's that like behind the beat funk. You know what I mean? It's like, and people like think of it, like, I don't know, it's lazy in a way, kind of, but it's the most powerful thing because you have to be able to be behind the beat and keep people dancing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's the fucking thing. And I that like just boom, greasy, fucking back in the pocket, like so funky. And but like that feeling to like ahead of a beat excitement, you're leaning forward like and
Like
all
Max
that all
Roach.
yeah, like Max Roach or like Robo. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like
Yeah.
yeah, like and there's all the everything in between, all those subtleties, and Chad's really great at that. Like Chad can fucking put it wherever you want it and keep it there like a fucking metronome.
It's funny, he felt kind of like the odd man out when he first joined the band, he told me, because he was like a Harley riding jock from Detroit.
Oh,
And you
totally.
guys were into weird arty shit.
Yeah, and he didn't even know what the fuck we were. Because it's funny because I always like,
He told me you tried to force him to cut his hair.
yeah. We told him he had to cut it when he joined the band because he looked like he was ready to join Guns N' Roses. He had like like a cheesy leather jacket, long hair, and a bandana, and like everything that we. And at the time, you know, the lines were so drawn, especially. And then I don't, in L.A. it was like. And it's funny now because I look back at it and we're just all rock bands,
Well, especially, yeah, the interesting thing to me is that I was born in 1980, so when I was kind of looking to music to find an identity in the early 90s, the Chili Peppers at that point were already basically just as commercial as Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so I found my way through punk rock like Fugazi. And then the funny thing is that, now Fugazi is bringing you into my life for this hour.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's a while ago. We're doing a festival a couple of years ago or something, and we're playing with Dinosaur Jr. and and I was watching, Jay Mascis fucking shred, and I was hanging out with those guys after they played or before we played. At some point, you're milling around at a festival, and and it really like I felt so powerfully like they like around the time when we started, we made Blood Sugar Sex Magic and then Californication, we went from being like this underground band to a band that played theaters to all of a sudden we blew the fuck up, to this, very commercially successful band. And we were like, Dinosaur Jr. was like, a band that was like, the like kings of the underground in a way that Fugazi or Sonic Youth was. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like super respected and smart and critics and all this stuff. And we're like,
SST.
what's that?
They were part of the SST.
Yeah. Oh, were they SST?
Yeah, they were on SST.
Okay. Okay. I always think of them as being more East Coast for some reason, but I
Well,
guess
their
SST.
first album was on, I think it was called Dutch India Records,
Oh, right.
which went on to become like one of the guys that had that went on to create Matador. But then after that, they were on SST.
Yeah, yeah.
I just know that because that was like when I was a kid, the SST catalog was everything, to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love, that fucking awesome catalog. I actually I used to have a great jam sessions with Greg Ginn. We used to fucking throw down, but anyways, but, sorry,
You were
I'm spacing.
backstage hanging out with
Oh yeah, I know. I was
Dinosaur
talking to
Jr.
those guys, and it dawned on me like, we're playing this festival and, 2007, 18, whatever it is, and there's like all these, computer bands and electronic and hip hop and trance and grimes and you know what I mean? Like all these modern bands, and like I'm realizing like we're the fucking survivors of rock music. You know what I mean? Like we're up there, there's like, we're both like 4-piece bands up there doing our best to rock the fuck out, you know? And it was like the lines, like they seemed a million miles away from us at that time. And I'm sure that they considered themselves a million miles away from a band like us, But we were like essentially doing the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
And it was like all that, like the things that seemed where the lines seemed like of genres seemed so far apart. Now it's like we're basically doing the exact same fucking thing, you know.
Yeah. And one thing that comes up on this show a lot is I think before music streaming became widely available, and when you had to purchase records and kind of, you had a limited resources, music was much more of a social signifier than it is now. Like the genres of music that you would listen to, just like what you were saying, like you were either into jazz or you were into punk rock, and it wasn't common for people to like a broad range of music or to espouse the love of it. It was a time when
Totally.
people would look to artists to represent a part of themselves that they couldn't articulate.
Totally. And I think maybe people still do that, but in a much more broad way, you know. And and now it's like for now it's like when I meet people now, especially like young people, they're just really into music, not just putting on a fucking Spotify playlist and playing what's popular, or they listen to a record, like they listen to an artist that they like, and they just press his name in on the computer and it starts playing. They don't even listen to a fucking album as a statement. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like when when P Funk or Stevie Wonder, whoever, when they made an album, it was like this album, the sequence of it, the theme of it, everything about it is about, this is an important statement to me. This is a weather system. This is how I feel now. And this is like, it's put together so thoughtfully to express a thing in the order of the song and stuff. And now everything just comes out in any old order and it's just, oh, this person. You know what I mean?
Which is basically what it was in Signed, Sealed, Delivers Stevie Wonder days, in the 50s and early 60s before the LP became the predominant format.
Totally.
It's back to
Back to
singles.
singles.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now it's spread over such a bigger range of time. It's just now it's just like, well, here's the list, and you get it from the one that sold the most to the one that sold the second most to third most. It's pure commerce. You know what I mean?
Algorithmic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just based on which one, how much money it generated. Ultimately, and so I guess my point being, like, now you meet people, it's just like the lines have become so much further apart. Like now it's like, are you really into music? Because that's like when I just meet someone now, like that they really like care about a music deeply, where they study the shit. Like that in itself, like I don't give a fuck if you like underground or overground or whatever. Like you actually really love music. You know,
Hmm.
it's not a background noise for your Spotify fucking thing. You know?
Well, it's probably easier to engage with music in a non-deliberate way than it ever has been. And if you think
Yeah,
about like
yeah,
even 100 years ago, before recorded music was widely available, if you wanted to hear music, you had to either play it yourself or
yeah,
go hear somebody playing it in person.
yeah,
And now
yeah.
we're pretty far away from that paradigm.
Yeah, and it's just gotten further and further to like, well, okay, you put on a record and you know, you might pay attention, you might not. To now, it's like, I mean, I do it. It's bad. Like I put on computer music on my computer, and then I kind of go walk away, you know, or
Hmm.
think about something else, or go, you know what I mean? Go do something else. Where at least like with a record, you had to like watch it, don't fuck your needle up, and you put it on to listen to it. You know what I mean?
Right.
You put it on, you sat there and you listened. You didn't do something else. It wasn't, you know, it's, yeah, you're right. It's just like less and less likely because you don't have to. You don't have to. It's just this convenience, you know. Um, but I just to circle back a little bit more. A long time ago, we started talking about how I found my voice as a bass player, and after I got into rock music with Hillel, I had another awakening after I had joined Fear when I heard the Germs, and that was like a record for me that really blew my mind, just by how it made me feel, and when I that was when I really like virtuosity meant nothing to me anymore.
Hmm.
It, you know, I appreciate the craft of someone who can play well, but in terms of the purpose of music and what music does to you, I listened to this record that was, you know, no one was playing anything slightly virtuosic. I mean, maybe Don Bowles played drums fast well, you know what I mean? But just the sound of them together by virtue of the intent of what they were doing, and the like unspoken like kind of telepathic bonds that people have because they're friends. What happened because of that, and the way it made me feel, made me realize that virtuosity, you know, it's like I still like virtuosity, but it is like not even close to being a requirement to making good music. And that was when, that was when I really embraced music purely as just an energetic force, as opposed to anything but that. And obviously, you know, I used every tool I had and everything I ever loved. But when I did that, when I was able to see music just as that, just as this energetic thing, without any category or any genre or anything meaning anything to me, that was when
Hmm.
I was really able to find my own voice as a musician.
And earlier you mentioned that you're always trying to get better. So what does it mean to get better to you?
Um, just to like deepen and widen and myself as a musician, like just growing like this, you know, like this past week I've, you know, been playing a lot of bass, and I've been like learning blues guitar solos on bass, and makes me really, you know, just like move my fingers around in a different way and gives me more colors to paint with, and it gets me, I get lost in like someone else's feeling,
Hmm.
you know, and I just feel like I get better. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to be a better bass soloist now, you know, or whatever it is, you know, like just being like remaining curious and open, and you know, what is that crappy pop song doing, and what it's doing something that I would never ever do, and shit, the fact that I would never ever do it is probably because I don't know how to do it, you know, and what is it in there that's different? What can I learn? You know, and just like always being a student. I don't think of, I just think of myself as a music student.
Do you ever sit down to play and you just can't connect to that sacred feeling you were describing earlier?
Yeah, I usually get there. I usually get there. I mean, I might not be playing anything great or new or anything, But usually, like, if I spend a little time, I mean, sometimes I might just pick it up. But even for me, even just finger to string or, finger to piano note, whatever it is, like, just the act in itself is a sacred thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always feel like just picking it up and hitting it is something beautiful. But usually, like, I might be playing something I played a million times, or like something I played a million times. But once I kind of like let go and get lost, it's always a sacred thing.
Well, man, I think that's a great place to end it, unless there's anything else you want to discuss.
No, no, I'm good. I'm good. Um, yeah, no, that's cool.
Well, Flea, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Joe. And I'm cool. I'm glad that Ian hooked us up. Like, I probably wouldn't have done it, but Ian recommended you.
His vote of confidence means a lot to me.
Yeah, to me too.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.